Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security.
Hello, this is John Bicknell, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Cognitive Crucible. Some listeners may recall that back in April of 2021, the Information Professionals Association, in collaboration with the University of Maryland's Applied Research Lab for Intelligence and Security, also known as ARLIS, co-hosted the Phoenix Challenge Conference, and what a conference it was. The lineup of speakers and panelists were a who's who of information operations practitioners, thought leaders, academics, policymakers, and the list goes on and on. The keynote speaker for the Phoenix Challenge was Dr. Michael Vickers, who was the former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, or SOLIC. During his keynote, Dr. Vickers spoke about the growing criticality of information operations and the ways in which our adversaries in great power competition have learned to use our openness, our values, and our own technologies against Western democracies. All of the videos and the conference report are available on the Information Professionals website. However, in order to access all of these resources, you need to be an IPA member. And I can think of no better opportunity than right now, if you have been sitting on the fence, to join IPA, support our mission, and as a thank you, you get access to these materials, these resources right away. There are 4 videos, including Dr. Vickers' keynote address and the conference report that I mentioned. It is not just a 1 or 2 page executive summary. It is a thick, dense recap of the discussions that were had during the conference, as well as color commentary by editors from the Information Professionals Association board, as well as from ARLIS. And combined, all of these resources are very much worth the price of membership. So without any further ado, next, Mr. Austin Branch will introduce Dr. Vickers briefly, and then you will get to hear a short excerpt from his keynote address where Dr. Vickers recaps his 5 trends in information operations that we need to be sitting up and paying attention to.
On behalf of the Applied Research Lab for Intelligence Security and IPA, it's my absolute honor to introduce the Honorable Dr. Michael Vickers as the Phoenix Challenge inaugural keynote speaker. Look, Dr. Vickers has decades of extraordinary and exemplary service, beginning as an Army Special Forces officer, a noted intelligence operations officer, and ultimately his selection to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict from 2007 to 2011, and then leading the Defense Intelligence Enterprise as the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence from 2011 to 2015. Where he helped lead and pioneer many of the efforts we plan to discuss during this Phoenix Challenge. Today, Dr. Vickers continues to serve on various prestigious industry and government boards, which includes the key advisory role to the DoD intelligence community and to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Dr. Vickers, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Austin, for that very kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Phoenix Challenge has really lived up to its name. It's great to see the conference get resurrected from the inferno of the Budget Control Act, otherwise known as sequestration, after a nearly decade-long hiatus. Let me begin by offering a few thoughts on the major trends in information operations. Information operations, of course, are nothing new. They have been particularly prominent historically in ideological conflicts and featured prominently in the Cold War and the wars with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Deception, a subset of information operations, is as old as warfare itself. As the information and strategic environments have evolved, so too have information operations. As a former CIA operations officer during the 1980s, I could go on for hours about the IO competition during our long struggle against the Soviet Empire. Suffice it to say, IO was a key tool in our arsenal in supporting anti-communist resistance movements in Afghanistan and elsewhere in the Third World, in Poland, and even in the Soviet Union itself. One of the many info ops we did in those days was to smuggle miniaturized copies of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago to Soviet dissidents. Given the very small print size that was required, I have to confess that part of me wondered whether we really were on the side of the dissidents. During the wars with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, IO also played an important role. One important caveat I would add, however, is that it is a lot easier to dismantle a radical Islamist terrorist group than it is to defeat its ideology. Al-Qaeda and ISIS used IO to spread their message, provide justification for their actions, recruit global jihadists from over 100 nations, and debate strategy and Islam in a private chat forum. We used IO to counter their narrative and to sow dissent in their ranks. We enjoyed periodic success at the operational level, but much less at the strategic level. We were also more effective when we covertly amplified Islamist voices rather than overtly trying to convince our target audiences of the virtues of Western ideals. Okay, so let me turn to the big trends in information operation. I'd suggest there are 5 of them. The first is that with the major change in the strategic environment brought about by the return of great power competition, IO has once again become a central strategic competition. I emphasize the words central and strategic. It is a core feature of Russia's approach to strategic competition with the West and its new way of war. In different ways, it is also central to China's plans to displace the US as the leader of the international system. The second major trend is the dramatic expansion of the information space through social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. The third major trend is the strong polarization of the information sphere, particularly within free societies, and this puts democracies at a distinct disadvantage. The fourth major trend is what I call the fake real competition. As false information proliferates and effectively competes with true information. The bad news is that false information is certainly holding its own, if not winning, in this competition. The fifth and final trend is about technology, the application of cyber operations, automation, and artificial intelligence to information operations. It will only make IO more powerful. So what are the implications of these trends for the United States and its allies? First and foremost, we need to recognize IO's strategic ascendance. It has significant implications for the way we organize ourselves and conceive of and employ force, kinetic and non-kinetic. Russian operators, and to a lesser but growing extent, China's, have identified our national will and political unity as our strategic center of gravity, and they target our allies in the same manner. We need to view information influence operations as the central strategic competition that it is. In my forthcoming memoirs, which I expect will be out this fall, I argue that our economic and technological competition with China and our information competition with Russia and China will be the central determinants of whether we remain the leading power in the international system over the next 3 decades, and more broadly, whether we and our democratic allies will prevail in the democracy-autocracy competition that is well underway. IO needs to be given greater prominence at the NSC level, or National Security Council level, and IO needs to be reconceptualized as a fight that we must wage offensively as well as defensively. The increased centrality of IO also has implications for DoD. As the balance between kinetic and non-kinetic warfare shifts, we need to ensure that our institutions are responding appropriately in terms of operational plans, career management, etc. Within one of my own primary communities, special operations, for example, we need to elevate the role of what used to be called psychological operations, now military information support operations. Finally, we need to view information operations as its own domain. We should not conflate it with cyber operations and electronic warfare, despite their own growing strategic importance.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.